Hi, this is Misha, and this is kind of something I was requested to do by a viewer or two, and happy to do it. We've featured both of these guns in a video or two in the past, but thought we would kind of compare and contrast the Russian SKS. This is a 1950 example, with the Czechoslovakian Vz.52. I honestly forget the year on it, but it's a pretty, they didn't make these for too terribly long, so it's going to be early to mid 50s. Oftentimes the Vz.52 is mistaken for an SKS variant, and it is in absolutely no way this. For one thing, just to begin with, this fires 7.62 by 45, which is a unique proprietary round used in Czechoslovakia in the 50s. There were only a couple of guns ever chambered for it. And the SKS fires, as probably, we all know, 7.62 by 39, which is one of the most common and ubiquitous calibers in the entire world. So for one thing, we fire a different cartridge. Close, but different. For another, the SKS has a fixed 10-round mag. As you see, you can dump the bottom out kind of like on a Mosin, but it is fixed, and you would top it off via stripper clips. The Vz.52 feeds from a detachable 10-round mag. They would usually issue 2 mags to each soldier for these. Get that in there. There we go. But you could also top this up off with stripper clips as well. So both could be fed via stripper clip. However, this did have the detachable 10-round mag and was issued with at least 1 spare mag. The bayonets are very different. This is on the side, as you see. Folds up. Locks this way. Not exactly the strongest bayonet, but it gave the soldiers a bayonet. It is lightweight, and it does lock very securely. The latches can wear and get flimsy, but as issued. The SKS has a more robust bayonet, but it's also much heavier. These are just radically different guns. The SKS is really an evolution of Simonov's earlier designs, such as the AVS-36 and the SVS-38. The Vz.52 is really more akin to the M1 Garand. It takes a lot of cues from the Garand, especially its disassembly, its trigger group, and to some extent its gas system. Now these things can be a real bear to disassemble, I apologize. But see what we can do here. One neat thing, this handguard does lift right off, and you can see part of the workings. The gas system is a sleeve. In fact, if I pull this back, lock it open, you can see there is a gas port that pushes this back to a short throw. This pushes 2 little forks, one on each side of the bolt carrier, to manipulate its recoiling. So the piston is actually located around the barrel and is covered by this rather interesting and easy to access handguard made from stamped steel and wood. For other disassembly, you actually take the trigger group out like you would on a Grand and then separate it from the stock. Back here, sometimes these things can be a real bear. Let's see how this one is. I may be wishing I didn't do this in a second. I thought that was hard to do normally. On camera, it's really not easy. Come on. Just try not to hit myself with the spring. There, you see what I mean. It's a very long, thin spring. There's your dust cover. Take the mag out. There's your bolt group. So let's get to the SKS too. This one, it's much like on a Kalashnikov. This lifts up for your gas system. There's actually several little springs and tings in there. This pin pulls out the back. I'm sure most of you are pretty familiar with SKS's. Dust cover. Thank goodness we actually have a captive spring. Drop this down. Here's our bolt group. Let's look at this gas system. These can be a little finicky because there are various little springs in here that love to launch in some of these. Okay. And then your piston goes. Well, you can see, anywho, here is your piston. It's just a short stroke piston, very long and tapered, more or less free floating, and a tube comes out and taps your bolt carrier. There is a secondary piston here inside the receiver that is spring loaded, and it actually is held in by this. Let's see if I can. I'm not very used to taking these out. I think I'll just leave that one in if you guys don't mind. It's a little spring loaded thing there. You just rotate this further forward and it'll come out when you press in on it. So if you forgive me for that, I think I'll just leave it in. We're allowed to be a little lazy, aren't we? But as you see, the gas systems are very different. As to the bolts, well, get some of this out of the way here. This is an interesting bolt, to say the least. There is a notch to take it out. You actually line it up, and if you can't tell, I'm not terribly experienced with taking these out because it's just not something I have to do on a regular basis. There we go. You just kind of got to fiddle with it till it pops out. It tilts out as opposed to just pulling out. Set this here. Your SKS is a little more straightforward. The carrier pops out, and a bolt just kind of pulls out of the gun. So this is your SKS bolt. This is an early one that is spring loaded. Most of them are free floated firing pins. This is a tilting bolt. It'll lock into the receiver. Carrier is very simple. It just grabs the bolt, unlock, locked in, being tapped by the gas piston. Actually, it's a piston extension. And we have a very typical receiver in here. Milled receiver, typical trigger group, very reminiscent of Simonon's earlier designs. Of course, this is semi-auto only. Our safeties down here. These early ones did not have spring-loaded safeties. Later ones would have a little spring-loaded plunger. Comparing that with the VZ, this is our bolt group. We also have a spring-loaded firing pin, and these all wood. This carrier, the way it locks is very different. Take it out here. This is our extractor. You see it rides up and down. This actually tilts the opposite direction. Locking in at the front as opposed to the back. You can see the lugs and everything. Very distinctive. Here you can see the surface, and it would be locking up front here, tipping down into the front of the receiver, as opposed to the SKS, which is going to have a locking surface at the rear. Here, let me push this bolt all the way back here. So the bolts are similar in a certain way, but really reversed to each other. And what I found really neat about the VZ is how the extractor moves up and down for the tip, for the tilting, tipping action to get it out of the way. Carriers, just a carrier. The original Vz.52 has a barrel that is threaded into, screwed into a receiver. The bore is not chrome lined. However, when they went to the 52-57, which was in 7.6239, they would go to a chrome lined bore, and it would be pressed and pinned into the receiver, much like on the later Vz.58 and Soviet AKM. As to this SKS, again, this is an earlier one, so we're going to have some interesting early features. This one does not have a chrome lined bore either. And SKS barrels in Russia were always threaded in, screwed into the receiver. Now, if you go over to places like China, later on they would go to a press and pin barrel, but Russia never would, because they would pretty much get rid of the SKS in production early on. So as you can see, the gas system is radically different. The bolt system has a little bit of similarity, but is quite a bit different. The recoil spring, quite different. And the trigger group is quite different. This is again more of a Simonov design, and this is more of a Grand design. The safety on this is also here at the front of the trigger guard, not dissimilar to a Grand. It's not in the middle of the trigger guard, it's on the side, but same general location. Alright, so we have them back together. Sorry, the Vz.52 can be a royal pain. It's that spring, it likes to crimp up on you. Got her back though. So as you see, these are pretty different guns in a lot of ways. Now that said, the way they were used, their application was the same. These are both very early self-loading rifles. Now in Czechoslovakia, this was really the first one they made domestically. They had used some of the German G43s before. And in Russia, of course, there was the AVS-36, the SVT-38, and the SVT-40, but really the SKS is one of the first. And of course, these were both firing an intermediate cartridge, not a full power rifle cartridge. So there's something to be said for that as well. So yeah, even though they were very mechanically different, the way they were used was very similar. In fact, they were in production for very similar periods of time. This went into production in Russia in 1949 and was out of production by the mid to late 50s. People disagree if it's 56, 57, 58, but either way, you get the idea. And the Vz.52 went into production in 1952 and was out of production by 1957, and again was replaced by the Vz.58 select fire assault rifle a short time later. So these were out of frontline service by the 60s, and then yeah. Now that said, these did move around the world quite a bit. You saw quite a few go over to Cuba. Many ended up in Grenada. Many ended up in African areas, and not a small number ended up in Vietnam. Czechoslovakia was quite a major weapons provider in the communist bloc nations. Well, as I said, this was a request to kind of look and compare the difference between these two, and as you can see, they are both quite different. Even the slings are pretty different. They both store a cleaning kit in the buttstock. Yeah, this one has an AK style spring-loaded trapdoor. This one you actually remove the entire butt plate to get to. It's a larger compartment. But yeah, very, very different. Well, if you have any questions or comments, please post them below. If you liked the video, please click like. If you enjoyed it, please maybe check some of our other videos out. We try to have some unique mill syrup and modern syrup guns. Really appreciate you tuning in. This is Nisha, and we'll catch you next time.